At 7:43 on a Wednesday morning, your financial life is probably not being destroyed by greed. It is being destroyed by 10 smaller things that all have the same root cause. You woke up late, so breakfast became something expensive and forgettable. You left the house flustered, so the toll road suddenly seemed worth it. You forgot to move money before the autopay hit. You ordered lunch because the day got away from you. You paid for convenience again at dinner because by 7:15 your brain was done negotiating with reality. Then, right before bed, you clicked "buy now" on something you did not need because spending money felt easier than feeling behind. That is not luxury. That is not reckless living. That is not somebody trying to fake a rich lifestyle on a middle-income budget. That is urgency. And urgency is one of the most expensive financial environments a person can live in. A lot of people think they overspend because they are impulsive, disorganized, or just bad with money. What they miss is that money decisions do not happen in a vacuum. They happen inside a schedule. They happen inside fatigue. They happen inside the stress of trying to keep up with a life that is always slightly faster, tighter, and more demanding than your current systems can comfortably handle. When that becomes your normal state, you stop making calm decisions. You start making fast decisions. And fast decisions are usually expensive. Nick here, and today I want to talk about why being in a rush quietly drains more money than most people realize, how time pressure distorts everyday financial choices, and why the people who seem good with money are often not more disciplined in some heroic way. A lot of the time, they just built enough calm into their lives that they can still hear themselves think before spending. Why urgency changes the price of everything. Money gets weird when time gets tight. That is the first thing to understand. A lot of decisions that look irrational on paper become completely understandable once you add urgency. The expensive parking lot, the rushed grocery run, the last-minute flight, the food delivery, the replacement fee, the forgotten subscription renewal, the missed payment, the $18 thing that would have been $9 if you had planned ahead by 48 hours. Urgency changes the price structure of your life. Not officially. The shelf price might be the same. The monthly bill might be the same. The menu is still the menu. But when you are rushed, you lose access to the cheaper version of most decisions. You do not compare insurance rates when you are overwhelmed. You do not prep food when the week feels like a loose collection of emergencies. You do not fix the small problem early when every day already feels full. You do not negotiate, optimize, organize, or review when your life is operating like a browser with 39 tabs open, and one of them is definitely playing music, but you cannot find which one. That is why urgency is such an underrated money problem. It is not just stressful. It is inflationary. It makes your version of normal life more expensive than it needed to be. The day-to-day version of this is everywhere. Let's take a normal weekday and watch how urgency quietly extracts money. You are late in the morning, so you skip the home coffee and buy one on the way. Maybe breakfast too. You forget lunch, or you never packed one because last night was chaos, so now lunch is whatever is fastest. You do not have time to stop at the cheaper store, so you grab the same things at the overpriced place near work. You are going to cancel that subscription, return that package, dispute that fee, call the provider, or switch the plan, but the week got busy. You missed the payment window by a day because there was a lot going on, and now there is a fee. You do not cook because the kitchen is a mess and your energy is gone, so dinner becomes takeout again. Nothing here feels like a major decision. That is what makes it dangerous. It does not feel like overspending. It feels like surviving the schedule. Now multiply that by a month, then a year, then 5. A lot of people are not leaking money through dramatic vice. They are leaking it through time pressure. Their money is not being destroyed by one giant flaw. It is being quietly shaved off by rushed substitutes for systems they never had the bandwidth to build. The math gets ugly faster than people think. Let's put some numbers on a very normal urgency pattern. Maybe the rushed coffee and breakfast adds $11 3 times a week. That is about $132 a month. Maybe the unplanned lunches add another $60 a week compared to bringing food or planning better. That is around $240 a month. Maybe the convenience dinners, store markups, rushed transportation choices, and random late fees add another $250 to $350 a month. Now you are somewhere between roughly $620 and $720 a month in urgency spending. That is $7,400 to $8,600 a year. Again, not because you bought a luxury watch, Not because you are trying to look rich. Not because you are irresponsible in some cinematic way. Because you are tired and time poor. Invest $700 a month at 8% for 20 years, and you are looking at something in the neighborhood of $412,000. That is an astonishing amount of money to lose to the fact that your life never quite slows down enough for lower-cost decisions to happen consistently. And even that number is conservative because it does not include the larger strategic costs of urgency, which are often much worse. Urgency makes you bad at the big decisions too. This is where the problem stops being about coffee and takeout and starts becoming about your actual life. When people are constantly rushed, they do not just overspend on convenience. They underthink the important stuff. They sign the lease because the move has to happen now. They finance the car because they do not have time to deal with an unreliable one anymore. They renew the expensive plan because I'll look at it later. They accept the first decent job offer because the search is exhausting. They delay learning about investing because life has felt too chaotic to sit down and think properly about money. Urgency makes people settle. That is one of its most expensive side effects. If your nervous system is always trying to get through the week, you stop evaluating your life strategically. You start treating the fastest acceptable answer as the correct answer. That logic might get you through Tuesday. It is terrible at building wealth over 10 years. This is how people end up in expensive defaults they never fully chose. Not because they ran a careful cost-benefit analysis and concluded, yes, this is the optimal structure for my financial future. Because they were tired and needed a decision to be over. There is a lot of money hidden inside that sentence. I just needed the decision to be over. The connection between urgency and helpless spending. There is also an emotional piece to this that matters. When people are always rushed, they start spending not just for convenience, but for relief. That is a different category. Relief spending is what happens when your life has been so fast, so fragmented, so demanding that buying something becomes a tiny act of emotional control. You had a long day, so you order dinner. The week was brutal, so you say yes to the trip. You feel behind, so the little purchase feels earned. You are stretched thin, so the premium option feels justified. None of this is morally shocking. It is deeply human. But it gets expensive because the spending is not solving the actual problem. It is just briefly softening the emotional experience of being overwhelmed. That means the schedule stays bad, the systems stay weak, and the same pressure returns tomorrow asking for another purchase. This is how urgency starts feeding other financial problems. It creates the conditions that make convenience spending, emotional spending, and sloppy admin all more likely at the same time. That is a brutal combination. Why some people always seem more financially together. This is one of the most misunderstood things in personal finance. People often assume that someone who seems calm and organized with money must have superior discipline, superior intelligence, or some blessed personality that makes budgeting feel like a hobby. Sometimes maybe, but often the real difference is simpler. Their life is not hitting them as fast. They have enough margin in time, money, or systems that decisions can happen before the deadline turns ugly. They have a cushion, so one surprise does not hijack the whole week. They have a routine, so food does not become a daily tactical failure. They have fewer recurring frictions, so small admin does not pile up into expensive negligence. In other words, their money life is not built inside constant urgency. That does not mean they are perfect. It means their environment is less hostile to good decision-making. This matters because it changes the way you should look at your own behavior. If you are always rushed, the answer is not just try harder. The answer is to reduce the number of places where your financial life is forced to operate at emergency speed. How rushed people quietly buy expensive identities. Another thing that happens under urgency is that people start paying for the fantasy of being more put together than they feel. The expensive planner. The productivity tool you never fully set up. The meal service you keep telling yourself will fix your week. The upgraded routine. The better phone. The thing that promises to save time, organize life, simplify the chaos, and turn you into the kind of adult who is no longer one forgotten errand away from unraveling. Sometimes those purchases help. Often they do not. Often they just become another attempt to spend your way out of a system problem. That is why urgency can be such a weird money trap. It does not just create obvious overspending. It creates aspirational overspending. You start buying solutions faster than you build structures. And when the structure never arrives, The money disappears while the chaos remains. The four biggest financial costs of living rushed. If you zoom out, urgency usually costs people in four major ways. First, it creates convenience inflation. Everything gets more expensive when there is no time to do the cheaper version. Food, transport, shopping, admin, all of it. Second, it creates fee vulnerability. Rushed lives miss windows, renewal windows, payment windows, return windows, discount windows, application windows. The modern economy is full of little toll booths for the overwhelmed. Third, it weakens maintenance. When there is no room to stay ahead of life, everything gets handled later. Repairs, planning, prevention, organizing, switching, reviewing. That delay is expensive. Fourth, it destroys strategic thinking. Urgent people make more short-term decisions. Short-term decisions often protect the day while damaging the year. That is the financial signature of a rushed life. You are always solving today and quietly making tomorrow more expensive. A comparison that explains almost everything. Imagine two people who both make $72,000 a year. Person A lives in a constant low-level rush. Their calendar is crowded, their systems are loose, their life is always 1 week behind itself. They patch things. They react. They spend for speed. They pay fees. They buy relief. They keep telling themselves that once things calm down, they will become more intentional. Person B earns the same amount, but their life has more breathing room. Not because they are lazy or especially gifted. They just protect margin aggressively. Fewer obligations. More automation. Better planning. Stronger routines. They are not more moral. They are less compressed. 10 years later, those two financial lives can look dramatically different. Not because one person was wildly irresponsible. Because one person spent a decade paying rush prices. That includes literal prices, like convenience and fees, and hidden prices, like weaker investing, slower learning, bad defaults, and more exhausted decision-making. The rushed person often feels like they work just as hard and somehow still have less to show for it. That feeling is not imaginary. They have been living inside a more expensive version of time. Why this is getting worse now? This problem has become more common because modern life is incredibly good at normalizing urgency. Everyone is behind. Everyone is reachable. Everything is faster. Everything can be ordered instantly, delivered instantly, renewed automatically, decided at the last minute, and emotionally justified as just how life is right now. That environment rewards speed and punishes reflection, which means the person who wants to build a strong financial life has to actively defend calm, because calm is no longer the default. It is something you build. And if you do not build it, the market is happy to monetize your rush. That is what delivery fees are. That is what late fees are. That is what premium convenience is. That is what stress spending is. A lot of businesses are not selling you products. They are selling you compressed time solutions. That is why urgency is so profitable for everyone except the person living inside it. What actually breaks the urgency loop? This is the part where bad personal finance content usually says something useless like, just be more intentional. No kidding. That is not a plan. The real fix is not a personality upgrade. It is a structural reduction in the number of things that force rush decisions in the first place. Start with the big pressure points. Where in your life is money repeatedly getting spent because the cheaper option requires time, calm, or energy you do not have? Food is usually one. Transportation is often another. Admin and recurring bills are a huge one. The answer is not to optimize every category perfectly. The answer is to remove the recurring conditions that keep generating expensive speed. That might mean automating the bills that keep producing stupid fees, simplifying the schedule, reducing commitments that create chaos spending, paying a little more in one place to stop bleeding money in 5 others, keeping a bigger cash cushion so urgency does not instantly turn into debt, or fixing one recurring friction that keeps making every week harder than it should be. This is what people miss. Sometimes the smartest financial move is not the one with the lowest price. It is the one that makes the rest of the month cheaper. A better question to ask, instead of asking, how do I spend less this week? Try asking, what keeps making my week expensive? That question lands differently, because now you are not just chasing isolated transactions. You are looking for the machinery, the meal issue, the car issue, the time issue, the admin issue, the exhaustion issue, The life is overbooked issue. That is where real savings often live. Not in heroic self-denial, but in removing the conditions that keep forcing expensive choices. The part that should stay with you. A rushed life is rarely just a scheduling problem. It is often a money problem with very good camouflage. It hides inside convenience. It hides inside exhaustion. It hides inside delayed decisions. It hides inside, "I'll deal with it later." It hides inside ordinary days that feel too full to handle properly. That is why people can look at their bank account and honestly not understand where the money went. It went to speed. It went to recovery. It went to relief. It went to all the places urgency charges a premium for not letting you think first. So if your finances feel leakier than they should, do not only look for waste. Look for pace. Because when life is always happening too fast, expensive decisions start masquerading as necessary ones. And if you want money to stop disappearing in these weird, frustrating ways, the solution is not always more discipline. Sometimes the solution is building a life that is calm enough for good decisions to survive contact with Tuesday.